There is something happening inside your body right now, and most people over 40 have absolutely no idea it's already started. It doesn't cause sharp pain. It doesn't show up on a basic blood test. And your doctor is very unlikely to bring it up at your next appointment. But it is progressing, quietly, every single day. And by the time most people finally notice it, when they struggle to get from a chair, when climbing a flight of stairs starts to feel like a real effort, when they look at their legs and realize something has changed, the process has already been going on for years. My name is Dr. Samuel Prescott. I've spent the last 2 decades studying the biology of aging muscle, not just how muscles look, but how they function, how they're maintained, and more importantly, how they begin to fail. And what I'm about to share with you today is something I believe every adult over 40 needs to understand. Not tomorrow, right now. Because here's the question I want you to sit with for the next few minutes. When was the last time you felt genuinely strong? Not just functional, truly strong. The kind of strength where you stood up without thinking about it, carried groceries without adjusting your grip, walked across a parking lot, and didn't feel it in your legs afterward. If you have to think back more than a year or 2 to answer that question, what I'm about to explain may be the most important thing you hear all year. Let me start with something most people get completely wrong. When we talk about muscle loss with age, most people picture an elderly person in a nursing home, frail, bedridden, that extreme. And because of that image, the vast majority of adults in their 40s, 50s, and 60s look at their own bodies and say, I'm fine. I'm not there yet. But that is exactly the problem. Because muscle loss doesn't begin at 80. It begins around 35. And by the time you reach 50, most people have already lost somewhere between 15 and 25% of their peak muscle mass. That's not a statistic from a dusty medical textbook. That is what is happening inside the bodies of millions of adults who still consider themselves reasonably healthy. And here's the part that makes this so insidious. The process is almost completely silent. You don't feel muscle tissue disappearing. You don't wake up one morning and think, I lost muscle overnight. What you feel is something much more subtle. You feel a little more tired than you used to. You feel like your legs are heavier at the end of the day. You notice that you're holding onto the railing when you go downstairs, not because you decided to be careful, but because something in your body told you to. You notice that recovering from a walk, a workout, any physical effort takes longer than it used to. These are not signs of bad luck. They are not signs of poor lifestyle choices. They are biological signals, and almost no one is paying attention to them. The scientific name for what I'm describing is sarcopenia. It comes from the Greek words for flesh and loss, and it is one of the most widespread and most underdiagnosed conditions affecting adults in the developed world today. We're not talking about a rare disease. We're talking about a biological process that is actively unfolding inside nearly every adult body on the planet, accelerating with each passing decade, and being almost entirely ignored by mainstream health conversations. So what is actually happening inside the muscle at a biological level? This is where it gets fascinating and a little alarming. There are 3 mechanisms working simultaneously that most people have never heard of. The first is something called anabolic resistance. In a young, healthy body, when you eat protein, when you exercise, when you sleep, your muscles receive a clear signal to rebuild, to repair, to grow stronger. That signal is processed efficiently. The muscle responds. But as we age, something changes. The muscle tissue becomes less sensitive to those signals. You can eat the same amount of protein you always have. You can do the same exercises. And your muscles simply respond less. The biological machinery that was once highly responsive starts to require more and more input to produce the same output. And eventually, for many people, the input is enough, and the muscle begins to lose the battle. The second mechanism is chronic low-grade inflammation. Now, inflammation itself is not a bad thing. It is a critical part of how the body heals and adapts. But the type of inflammation I'm talking about is different. It's not the acute inflammation you feel when you sprain your ankle. This is a slow, persistent, barely perceptible state of cellular stress that accumulates over decades of living. Poor sleep, processed food, sedentary periods, environmental stressors. All of these contribute to what researchers call inflammaging. And this state of chronic low-grade inflammation directly interferes with the muscle's ability to repair itself. It disrupts the cellular signals. It shortens the recovery window. And it means that even the muscle fibers you do have are operating in a compromised environment. The third mechanism is the most overlooked of all, the failure of muscle protein synthesis to keep pace with muscle protein breakdown. In simple terms, every day, your body is simultaneously breaking down old muscle tissue and building new muscle tissue. In youth, those two processes are roughly balanced. But as we age, the balance tips. Breakdown begins to outpace rebuilding. And unless something intervenes to correct that imbalance, the net result is progressive muscle loss. Not dramatic, not sudden, but relentless. Now here is what I want you to understand about all three of these mechanisms. They are not inevitable in the way that most people assume. They are biological processes, which means they can be influenced, they can be slowed, and in many cases, some of their effects can be meaningfully reversed if you understand what your body actually needs and give it the right support at the right time. And this brings me to something I've been researching for several years now that I think is profoundly underappreciated: the role of nighttime recovery in muscle health. We tend to think about muscle support in terms of what we do during the day: exercise, protein intake, activity. But the most powerful window of muscle repair and regeneration actually happens while you sleep. During deep sleep, your body releases growth hormone. Cellular repair accelerates. Protein synthesis peaks. And the signals that tell your muscles to maintain themselves, to resist breakdown, are at their most active. The problem is that most adults over 40 are not giving their bodies what they need during this window to take full advantage of it. This is something that a small but growing number of people, particularly in certain communities across Northern and Central Europe, have understood intuitively for a long time. There is a practice, not widely publicized, not part of any mainstream health trend, of consuming a specific warm drink before sleep, a preparation centered around two key elements that work synergistically during the nighttime recovery window. The first is ashwagandha, an adaptogenic plant with a growing body of clinical research behind it, studied specifically for its role in reducing the cortisol burden that interferes with overnight muscle recovery. When cortisol, your primary stress hormone, remains elevated into the night, acts almost like a brake on muscle repair. It signals the body to prioritize other processes. Ashwagandha has been shown in multiple studies to help normalize cortisol patterns, creating a more favorable hormonal environment for recovery during sleep. The second element is amino acids, specifically the essential amino acids that your body cannot produce on its own and must obtain from outside sources. Here is why this matters so much at night. During sleep, your body is actively working to repair muscle fibers, but the raw materials, the amino acids, are not available. That repair process is limited. It's like a construction crew showing up to work and finding the materials haven't been delivered. The work that could have happened doesn't happen, and that missed opportunity compounds over time. Night after night, month after month, year after year. Warm water is used as the base for a simple reason. It facilitates absorption, promotes vasodilation in peripheral tissues, and signals to the nervous system that it's time to shift into a recovery state. The combination of these elements, taken as a warm drink 30 to 45 minutes before sleep, has been used by people in these communities as a way of supporting what the body is already trying to do during its overnight repair cycle. I want to be very clear about something. I am not telling you this drink is a cure. I'm not telling you it reverses decades of muscle loss overnight. What I am saying, based on the biology I just walked you through, is that this kind of intentional nighttime nutritional support is one of the most logical and underutilized strategies available to adults who want to protect their muscle health as they age. Because it works with your biology, not against it. It supports the window when your body is already doing its most critical repair work. Now, and I want you to pay close attention to this, if you've been noticing any of the signs I've described today, I need to say something directly to you. The difficulty getting up from the couch, the heaviness in your legs by midday, the feeling that recovery from any physical effort just takes longer than it should. These are not trivial inconveniences. They are early warning signals from your muscular system. And the biology of sarcopenia is not patient. It does not plateau and wait for you to get around to addressing it. It continues. And the further it progresses, the harder it becomes to reverse its course. There are people who recognize these signals early and who take action while their bodies are still highly responsive to support. And there are people who explain away the signals, who tell themselves it's just aging, who wait. And the difference in functional outcomes between those two groups, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, is significant. We're talking about the difference between someone who still walks confidently, climbs stairs without hesitation, carries their own groceries, lives independently, and someone who has quietly surrendered those capacities, one small step at a time, without ever making a conscious decision to do so. If you want to support your muscle health starting tonight, you could begin with the warm ashwagandha, an amino acid drink I described. Make it a habit before sleep. Give your body the recovery environment it's been missing. But I also want to tell you about something that goes considerably further than any home preparation. Because while the nighttime drink is a meaningful step, what I've seen produce the most significant and consistent results in adults looking to support their muscle function is a concentrated, precisely formulated combination of all 8 essential amino acids in the specific ratios and bioavailable forms that your body can actually use most efficiently. This is not a protein powder. This is not a general supplement. This is a targeted nutritional tool designed specifically around the mechanisms I described today: the anabolic resistance, the nighttime synthesis window, the need for the exact building blocks your body requires to maintain and rebuild muscle tissue. This combination of 8 essential amino acids gives your body the raw materials to do what it's biologically designed to do: build and maintain the protein structures that keep you feeling strong, capable, and physically younger than your years. People who have incorporated this into their nighttime routine consistently describe the same things: waking up feeling less stiff, recovering from physical activity faster, noticing that their legs feel more stable, their grip feels more secure, their energy on exertion feels more sustainable. These are not dramatic overnight transformations. They are the quiet, compounding results of giving your body what it needs during the window when it's most capable of using it. The link to learn more about this is in the description of this video and in the first comment below. I encourage you to go there now, not tomorrow, not after you see how you feel next week. Because here's the biological reality that I want to leave you with. The body's capacity to respond to this kind of support is not fixed. It is not the same at 60 as it is at 50. It is not the same at 50 as it is at 45. The window of responsiveness narrows over time. The muscle tissue you have right now is more responsive to nutritional support than the muscle tissue you will have in 2 years if nothing changes. That is not meant to frighten you. It is simply the biology, and it means that the most powerful moment to act is always the present one. Every week that passes without addressing the mechanisms I've described today is another week of the slow, silent imbalance between breakdown and rebuilding continuing unchecked. Every night, without adequate amino acid availability during the recovery window, is another missed opportunity for the repair your body was trying to complete. And every month of accumulated cortisol disruption, of chronic low-grade inflammation, of anabolic resistance going unsupported, narrows the distance between where you are now and functional decline that most people assume is simply inevitable. It is not inevitable, but it requires a decision. And that decision is most powerful when it's made while your body can still respond fully to it. The link is below. Go there, read through it carefully, and decide for yourself whether what you learn there is worth acting on. I believe it will be the most important step you take this year for your long-term strength, your independence, and your quality of life in the decades ahead.